This is a perfect example to kind of almost like a judging seminar of originality on an XKE. There's been things that have been done. It's a 50-year-old car. Parts wear out. Rubber gets in such bad condition it's not serviceable anymore. So there's been a few things changed. So I'll try and catch all those, but I'm not going to catch everything. But we're just going to highlight the originality parts of the car, and whatever we can point out that's not, we'll point out too. First off, the boot cover has the body number. When you buy a new boot cover, you don't get this kind of detail. They don't go to the trouble of making sure that they use this kind of pigskin colored vinyl on the inside. This material, the texture of this material is very, very hard to come by. This is an original top. The rubber's been changed. The rubber literally was just crumbling, and there was no way you could even consider sealing the windows, and every time you close the door, the rubber just fell. So the decision was made just to change these. The top is original. We'll erect the top in a little bit. So if you look at the texture of the rocker panels and the lack of foam underneath there, you can tell that that's original. The vinyl is not made in that crushed grain anymore with the kind of two-tone look. Yeah, it's just not available. So another thing you can tell on an original car is the factory used seam sealer, not always, but sometimes, to control leaks. And this still has the black seam sealer. And anytime that the seam sealer they used also had a flowable characteristic, so a lot of times it has that kind of wetted out look to it. This car also has all the original glass, so you can see the triplex mark. So the door glass is straight, so as it was going down the line when they were etching the glass, they etched them all laying in one direction. So if you feel it with your fingernail, the passenger side will have the etching on the inside. The driver's side will have the etching on the outside. This is tinted glass as well. Not all were tinted. That was an option. The same thing on the windshield. It's got the triplex etching, and it also has what's left of the triplex decal, which is very, very rare. There's people that reproduce that, and we typically put it on our restorations, but it's not always there. This is also an early enough car that the demister's grills are slot head screws. Original dash pad. If this was a coupe and it was the original dash pad, the little indention in front of the support rod would not be there. That's something in the reproduction pads. This car also has its footboard, and if you look at the build sheet, this car was delivered at the factory, and it actually has TX Primrose. So the original owner was from San Antonio, Texas. So I mean, you have to presume that maybe that they knew when they were building the car that it was a special order, and it was going in this particular car, Primrose exterior. It's kind of interesting. I mean, that's an assumption, but it certainly could be real. But this is for a person that is shorter limbed, so they have a footrest. Otherwise, a 6-foot plus person could easily sit in the passenger seat and barely reach the toe board. So this little filler, this is really rare to see in cars, more cars than not. This is kind of like the jack. They always disappear. Just fits nicely in the well there. Original radio, the key number and the number on the ignition switch match. So that's a match set. So it's the original switch. The steering wheel has its original finish and an original horn button. The decal is still on the speedometer. It's got its original run sticker, which is really unusual that it's still there after all this time. So the interior, the seats have obviously been changed before our customer purchased the car. We actually had to replace the carpets because they were literally down to the backing. All the fuzz was completely gone off the carpet. So unfortunately the carpets have been changed, but all the Hardura, all the vinyls, door cards, door caps, armrests, all that's original. It appears to have all of its original books and records, heritage certificate, the tool roll. This is interesting. This is the original owner kept a record of every time the car had fuel and was serviced. So that goes with the car. Original tool roll, the original key for adjusting the points and distributor, the original manual for the radio. So the original tools, a couple things missing. The weather strip is original because it still has the tape, cloth tape that they put over the seam. Jack in its bag. Paint appears to be really, really good condition. Sometimes there's a number on the deck lid, but this one doesn't have it. But it does have all the little black inserts for the emblem, as well as the black shims. All the bolts are the correct dimpled bolts. All the shake-proof washers are the correct black finish. So this is kind of a unique feature. These cars, when they were sprayed at the factory, actually were sprayed on a rotisserie, and sometimes they were sprayed upside down. So if you see, here's an upside down run. Not something that you would get doing a restoration, unless you were spraying it on a rotisserie. It's got the original correct lenses and lens bezels for the license plate lights. The body tag is still attached, never been off. The exhaust is not original. It's been replaced probably at one point just because it was completely worn out. Another thing, most people, when they have their car restored and they either send the original chrome out or they replace the overriders, this has a defined raised edge that goes all the way to here, and you can see how pronounced it is on the top. Most chromers and all the reproductions do not have that detail. So you can tell an unchromed overrider because of that detail. So it appears to have the original mat as well as the original side cards. Original finish on the tank, original finish in the car with you can see the seam sealer, how it kind of flows out. It doesn't have a texture pattern in there. There's actually a little clip for the pull still on there, this little clip there. And then in the 60s, very seldom did Jaguar use a yellow zinc or cad finish, but for some reason the trunk latch has always had that. The original and the replacements don't always have that color. That closes nice. They usually don't close that easy. So this kind of authenticates the miles, this little tag. 39,228. Looks like 1120 of 76. So it hasn't had very many miles since 1976. You can see the original rubber, and you can also see where they didn't always take great care with the yellow glue when they glued it on, and there's, you know, slops of glue, especially on the convertible tops. I mean, they took it out of a big bucket and just brushed it on. It's got the original wiper arms with the dots, Trico wiper arms, the dotted blades. So if you look at the top, this single stitch here, if you look on the inside, it actually attaches a shot bag. This is actually full of lead shot, and it's an anti-drumming bag. Starting in 1968, they put a drain in the bottom of the rocker, so if moisture got in there, it had a way to get out. All the replacement rockers have that drain in it. Most shops don't know or don't care enough to weld that up and close that up. So if I walk up to a car, the first thing I look at is I look for the spot welds here, and I look for that drain, and I can tell you if it's had floors and rockers. The other thing, you can tell if it's ever had a trunk floor, because this area from here to here, they actually hammered back at the factory. Any car that I've ever seen that has the original trunk floor, it's hammered back. Now, I don't know if they did that for wheel clearance or for some other reason, but more than likely that's the only thing we've been able to figure out. But that should always be a characteristic. So that's the second place I walk up to, and I look at when I look at a car that people claim to be original. So the paint on this car with a paint meter reads anywhere from 3 to 6.5, which is typical for an original paint, synthetic enamel. And if there was too many blemishes because of the characteristics of synthetic enamel, they would have to just respray the whole car. So you may have a car that has 6 mils, you may have a car that has 10 mils, and it could still be factory paint, depending on, you know, they were hand sprayed. So like I said, if there's too many blemishes in there, they just redo it. Under the engine compartment, it appears to have the original bottles, original harness. The master cylinder more than likely has been changed at some point just because it leaked. But the original band is still on the clutch slave. The generator still has its original tag and decals. The header tank might be original, but more than likely it's been changed just because they didn't, you know, they were steel and they would just rust out. Appears to have the original coil, the original paint in the head, not painted down the side as it should be. Now if you look at the carb side, this is not painted. Most restorers always paint that, and they always paint the front. They didn't paint the front. They painted this on the side, the center. It retains all its original strapping for the harness and the brake lines. All the original undercoating, where there's areas that actually are brushed and not the undercoating was, they brushed the pattern and then they kind of oversprayed it with spray. All its original black bolts. This is faded enough. That looks like that could actually be original. The original, some of the hoses have the white stripe on them, the raised white stripe for the heater hose. All the original clamps, Cheney clamps. Original screen, stone shield with the felt on the top. And if you look at the stone shield, it's actually gray. It's not painted silver. The wire itself is silver, but the frame is the same gray used on the convertible top frame. Some guys get that wrong. It's got the original data plate and original made in England plate. And then right here, in the last few years, the JC&A guys go back and forth about the overspray on the receiver for the bonnet. I have actually seen factory photos. There's some factory photos of a maroon car being in the prep area, and it clearly shows the overspray of the body on there. So those were left on when they painted the car. The bonnet came off to be painted, but those were left on. And you can clearly see how the seam sealer is just kind of squirted on there, and it just kind of slightly flows out. There's still places where you can see here where there's glue again on the cowl rubber, which has been changed, but when we changed it, we left all the original glue on there. We didn't want to disturb that. The washer bottle has its stamp on the side, appears to be 65, as well as the wiper motor. There's also remnants on the engine block, which you can't really see without a flashlight and looking at it. Below the carbs, the original stamping on the block had a white stripe of paint on there so you could see the number. That looks correct. The head stamping as well as the stamping on the picture frame is original. A lot of times when the cars are restored, that's actually painted over. And I've actually seen on original cars where they've taken sandpaper and they've actually sanded that down to bare, which with this being a European delivery or an English delivery, they may not have done that. That may have been something they actually did at the port when the cars came over in volume. But that's obviously original. So another feature is you can see the brush marks in the underseal and the red oxide primer underneath. And then this was actually painted over. The underside of the car, a lot of times it was just sprayed, but some of these areas where they wanted to control the overspray, it looks like they actually brushed it. The other thing is the bonnet hinges are actually painted. I've seen that a lot on original cars because the bonnets were fitted to the car, the bonnet came off, and the car went to the paint shop with the doors and the deck lid still attached, but the bonnets were painted separate so they could paint inside and out. Also, the pointedness of the safety catch reveals that that's probably an original safety catch. So if you walk around to the front, the last couple little details, you can see that real fine parting line at the top that runs all the way down for an original overrider. The posi drive screws, this is a 65, late 65, built in August, so you can still see the posi drive screws all the way around. Early 65s may still have slot head screws. The Lucas bulbs, the painted silver gray sugar scoops, not hammer tone like a lot of guys do, they're painted. You'll also see that the chrome stops at the headlight bucket surround. Stops, doesn't go underneath, and it stops at the rubber. This is a very unique feature that carried over from the 3.8. The later cars have vertical bars inside this front part of the lens. This is unique to the 3.8s and the early 4.2s. Those are very, very hard to find. All the paint on the bonnet is original, but there are some little places that we've actually touched up where there was just big stone chips.